All right. Should we just jump into it and see what happens?
Sure.
Yes, that's exactly what we need to do.
All right. Yeah, you got your supplies there,
Yeah,
Ray
I got
Dog?
Well, I am on my fourth beer, and I don't feel any more relaxed than I did before any beers I had. So,
God damn,
All right.
son.
All right.
Ray isn't playing for this episode. Fuck.
and I'm really regretting for not buying more. I need more.
Yeah, I mean, you know it's bad when you
Practically
need more than 4 beers to get through an episode.
Yes.
This is a 4-beer episode.
Unfortunately, only 4, yeah.
Yeah, this is only a 4-beer episode. Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended. We are a podcast. I am Fritz, the podcaster. We're joined also by Boris, a podcaster, and Ray, a podcaster. Ray.
That term highly bothers me.
Yeah, I wanted to see if I could say it 3 times without cringing, and I did. Yeah. So, what is this podcast about, podcaster? Ray, how you feeling? You seem,
Yeah, I'm not very happy about this podcast. I have to say.
Yeah.
I did suggest that we should do this topic,
Yeah.
and it was really kind of unnecessary to do it in this arc because this is an arc. I mean, I thought it's unnecessary, but maybe okay to do it because it's an arc about American fascism, and we're doing now today an episode about something which is called British Israelism, which you would
Right.
think is not so tightly connected to American fascism, but I thought, okay, it is actually important because it's it's a movement that influenced Christian identity very much, which is a very American and a very fascist thing.
And a very important, one of the most important,
Yeah,
like modern day American fascists.
and I mean, unfortunately, I was right. This is a very important topic, but I hated preparing it for some reason. I don't know. It was very. It's I mean, it's one of these things that you can explain in basically one sentence, which is like British Israelism, also called Anglo-Israelism. Maybe for this episode, it would be better to call it Anglo-Israelism because a lot of this will have to do with America, not with Britain. But okay, whatever. It's completely interchangeable. Is a belief that the British people, or Anglo-Saxon people, which can be defined in many different ways, as we'll see, are direct descendants, like biological descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That's what it is.
Oh, cool.
Hooray.
Short
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
All right, see you next week.
Yes. But unfortunately, it gets, I wouldn't say complicated, but more complex than that. In the sense there's like dozens and dozens of these assholes who are like insisting on this thing in many like different, like similar but a bit different ways throughout of the like late 19th century and first half of the 20th century in Britain and the US. So I was reading a book. I used a few different references, but mainly the book I did use is a book called "Religion and Racist Right: The Origins of the Christian Identity Movement," which is a book written by a guy called Michael Barkun. I hope that's the way you pronounce his last name. And I used a few different sources, but this is definitely the most useful one. It's a book about Christian identity, but first, I think 3 chapters are about British Israelism and the connection it has with the US.
I feel like, unfortunately, I was right is something I would really push to have engraved on your tombstone someday.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, it is. I think we'll see. Like, we can have a discussion about this in the end, how important this is. But I think it's like I think we're discovering while doing this episode this theme of Americanism is somehow important,
Yeah,
and this is really, you can even say that this is somehow the origins of ideological formulation of what Americanism is in some way. So I wouldn't say that British Israelism is like. I mean, it's a very important ideology and movement to understand both British and American nationalism, imperialism, and fascism, I think. I wouldn't say it's like the ideology at heart of everything, but I think it's important really to understand what is at the heart of these ideologies and systems.
It's funny because you would expect like the term British Israelism to denote something that would be inimical to like Nazism.
No, So something like called British Israelism is very important for understanding American fascism. I think we can discuss it in the end. So it has its like distant origins in the 17th century. And it's connected like this is like a distant precursor to British Israelism. It's not really exactly the same as it is, but it has to do with Puritans and Puritans in Britain and in the US. So in Britain, they developed this idea, which was connected, of course, because 17th century is the year which had the year 1666, which was very important for all kind of millenarian movements who were expecting the end of the world, basically, of the apocalypse, because of this. Just it was 666.
The number of the beast.
Yeah. So what Puritans in England claimed was that Britain will play a central role in the return of the Jews to Palestine. So this was like a belief present in the 17th century Britain. This will
not far off.
Yeah, and this will be like a crucial development in the second coming and the apocalypse and everything that they believed in.
So this is right after Shabbat Tzvi, right?
I was about to mention him actually, like soon. And in America, Puritans, they saw themselves as the new Israel, and also like they had these metaphors of how they're confronting the wilderness as ancient Israels did after the Exodus and such things. So like even in this like kind of faraway precursors of British Israelism, we already see that this idea is present in America already, and they already saw it as New Israel. But the important difference from actual British Israelism is these people, they use analogies, so they don't literally see themselves as ancient Israelites. They use metaphors, So these people actually exist, believe that the 10 lost tribes of Israel exist, and that it is not them, and that the lost tribes live somewhere hidden in the vastness of Asia. And all of these beliefs were kind of really misinterpretations of and vastly exaggerated rumors that they heard about our Balkan boy Shabbatai Tzvi, who at the time appeared as a Jewish false messiah, so the rumors were that even that the lost tribes reappeared and that they have an army and that they are like defeating the Turks. So this was like completely exaggerated. Shabbatai Tzvi never had an army. He was never in conflict with the Turks in such a way. In fact, he converted to Islam.
If you're new to the show, we did an episode on this with our friend
second
Pinto
arc.
in our second arc, so you can go back and take a listen. More about Shabbatai Tzvi and his sidekick Nathan of Gaza.
Yes.
They heard something about it, and then they completely exaggerated, and they actually wrote and published books about how the lost tribes reappeared in Asia and they have an army, and this was like a very popular theme at the time as a sign of end times and apocalypse. But the first guy who we could actually call some kind of a British Israelite, although he kind of anticipated the movement. He was not really the founder of it. Was this guy called Richard Brothers, who lived in the. He was born in 1757, died in 1824. So this was like much before the actual movement was founded. But he basically had the same idea, and this is different from the Puritans because he actually claimed that the Brits are actual descendants from the lost tribes of Israel. So he was a retired naval officer, and in 1791 he started having like prophetic visions, and 2 years later he decided that he has a divine mission to lead the Jews back to Palestine.
Do you think that this was actually probably him just like fucked up on opium or whatever the fuck they gave you to like after you were a retired officer or something?
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely nuts. So the second distinctive belief that he had was that most Jews are hidden amongst Europeans, and in particular the Brits. So this is basically So he's basically the first British Israelite, even before the movement existed. And so he had this belief, which is characteristic for British Israelites. There exists a hidden Israel, and so that the Europeans really need to realize their true identity. So identity is very important there as a word,
as a way to distinguish themselves from all these sneaky British Jews.
This is interesting because I will come to that. The whole thing, because they're not Jews. They don't want to be Jews. This is very important, and I will explain that. So he had followers at the time, but he was like institutionalized pretty quickly because because he had some kind of royal pretensions. Because he claimed that he's descendant of the house of David. So that was like problematic for the government, and so they basically institutionalized him, and this was the end of his movement. And
did he get lobotomized too?
I'm not sure, but after a few years he spent there, they let him go, but he was done. He didn't have any followers anymore. So that was the end. He didn't manage to start the movement, although he anticipated almost a generation before actually it appeared. So the first guy who actually...
It strikes me as crazy, sorry. It's insane that there was a point where a dude would just say something crazy, they'd institutionalize him, and then his movement would be over.
Yeah.
I feel like, look, fast forward to like Pele,
Right. Well, his problem was that he said that he's descendant of the house of David. I think this is the problem. If he, if he said maybe the king is the descendant of the house of David, I think he would not. He would maybe not be so insane. Yes. So that was the problem. So the next guy didn't make such a mistake. He was called John Wilson. So this is a generation later. We don't know exactly when he was born, but he died in 1871. So he's actually, we could say that he's the first real British Israelite in the sense that he's a reference for the movement. Like the Richard Brothers guy was kind of forgotten.
Okay.
Although he had all the good stuff there. He basically said it as it is. So John Wilson was actually he was Irish. So this is kind of
that's a show about Irish, British, Israelism, Americanism.
Yes.
Great.
So like many of these people that I will mention today, what he did was he lectured a lot and traveled a lot and preached a lot his truth. This guy in particular did that in Ireland and England, and he claimed that he discovered this hidden origin of Europeans. So he's talking about Europeans, and this is important.
Right.
And he says that he published a book in 1840, which was called Lectures on Our Israelitish Origin. I don't know how would you pronounce it.
Israelitish?
Yeah, it's like Israeletish.
I think you got it.
Yeah, that sounds about
Israelitish.
as right as it's gonna get.
Yes. So he had his book. He also started a bunch of periodicals. He was a middle class guy, like all of these people are. And so he claimed that the lost tribes of ancient Israel migrated to Europe. How did he prove this? Like all of these idiots, he used like extremely dumb etymology. So it's like,
of course, yeah.
Like not only like these British Israelites, but all of these like quacks. They say, okay, they compare languages and they compare words that sound similar to them, and then they conclude this means like some truths are hidden in that. So
it's basically the basis of the cursed Balkan memes.
Yes.
Twitter.
And this is why they have scientific pretensions. Later they will add some other stupid methodologies to it, but at this time they're mostly this etymological thing that will stay throughout, also the 20th century there. So, for example, these are things I won't get into. There are many stupid examples, but for example, they would say like Saxons. What that actually comes from is Isaac's sons. So in time it became Saxons. And he basically found a bunch of words that sound similar in English and Hebrew, and he said that basically English is completely rooted in ancient Hebrew. It's basically the same language, although it's like not even related at all, but that's what they believed in.
This is like a 5% Nation does that shit too, in a big way too, like just making up etymologies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a different version of basically the same thing.
I think that's our second 5%er reference of the Ark.
Is it?
I think so. Yeah.
I listened to hip hop a lot back in the day.
So Europeans are descendants of ancient, like these lost tribes of Israel. So, but then there's this problem: who are the Jews? They exist now. So, okay, they are descendants of the two tribes that were not lost, I guess. But they are all of these people are really keen on making distinction between Israelites and Jews. So how they do that is they say, okay, there was the northern kingdom of Israel, and this is where the Israelites come from. And then there was this lesser southern kingdom of Judah, and this is where the Jews come from. So the thing is that they always will repeat is, Jews, they are of Israelite origin, but Israelites are not Jews. So they're really keen on saying we're not Jews. And also, a big point they make is that like Jews, yes, they are Israelites, but they're like not. They're like B-class Israelites because the kingdom of Judah, like the most of these promises, like prophetic promises that God made, He gave them to Israelites in the northern kingdom. Only a few of these prophecies are really for the Israelites of the southern kingdom. So
it's like Nazis, like real German Nazis trying to wrap their head around Roma people, which is they're actual Aryans that live in Europe, and
right. Exactly.
We hate them. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, this is it. So the bulk of the prophecies are really intended to the northern Israel, the actual Israelites, and so and not only that, so this theme will continue throughout. So they are kind of to start like in the start they are kind of B-class Israelites, but what they did then was they intermarried with the worst of the Gentiles, the Jews, throughout the ages. So they became even worse. Like they are like really kind of they intermix with spiritually inferior people. So spiritual inferiority is something that is like transmitted through genes and biology. So they became even more kind of spiritually inferior through the ages. But okay, these are actually the guys who compared to others, they like the Jews. They're not like Christian identity. So they still say how although the Jews mingled with the worst of the Gentiles and therefore inherited the curse of the Gentiles, which will be only lifted after they accept Jesus, they are still our Israelite brothers. And
they're not aliens from another planet.
Yes, they have a role in the prophecy, and actually a crucial role when the best Israelites, the Brits and the Europeans, will help them go back to Palestine and accept Jesus, and so that's like a crucial moment in prophecy and apocalypse and everything. So they're still there. They have a chance to redeem themselves, and we'll help them.
Okay, how nice. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I was so worried that we wouldn't be allowed to join your fucking weird British club. Yeah.
Yes. So it's but okay. So for John Wilson, it's not only a British club, and this is important. So the Israelites are not only Anglo-Saxons, and they're also like all Germanic people. So Germans, but also he sees them in Italy, like their descendants in Italy and France and Switzerland and Scandinavia. So for him, all of these people are actual like ancient Israelites, but the Brits are like number one because they are the descendants of the super duper tribe of Ephraim, which is like the best tribe. This is like the tribe God
the cool kid tribe, the tribe that all the cool guys came from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all of them are like the like God's people. So the Jews are like C-class God's people. The all like Europeans are B-class, and then the Brits are they're the tribe of Ephraim. They're like
all right.
No, the team one. So Wilson had these kind of Teutonic or Pan-Germanic ideas. He was fascinated by Germanic prehistory. An interesting thing here is that Wilson and his followers they saw like evidence of what they claimed in the fact that the British people and Anglo-Saxons are like prone to democracy, which is something that we mentioned, I think, in the last episode. So he thought that there was something called natural democracy, which was practiced by unspoiled Anglo-Saxon people, and which developed organically out of their tribal life in Germany and England. So
this is like how the Ustashas said that they were separate from the Slavs because they had a propensity from statecraft that was inherited from their Aryan origins. Yeah.
But it's interesting, like this British focus on like democracy, and I was like reminded when we were talking about the German-American Bund and how they said we are for Americanism, and that means like we don't want to like implement some kind of German idea of national socialism. What it means in America is democracy, and so I see like this idea has deeper roots, I would say, somehow. So it's interesting how you can use democracy in this ideological way, basically as a kind of in this like white supremacist and like basically proto-Nazi way. I mean, if you say democracy is our like racial characteristics that organically came out of our tribal life, then basically you say, it's just for us.
Yeah.
Well, it's for the demos. It's for the people that you consider to be people.
Yes.
That's the tricky line.
That's pretty important.
Yes. And they also, based on this, they claim that Anglo-Saxons and all like Germanic people, they have a destiny to prevail over lesser breeds. So you have it there pretty clear.
So, they're not people.
Yeah, for real.
That don't deserve democracy.
Yes. So that was Wilson. So, but the guy who actually started British Israelism as a political and social, let's say maybe even better, social movement, was a guy called Edward Hine. Oh, basically, so I forgot to say, so Wilson was Irish, So I think
Yeah.
he was responsible because he wanted to include Irish also, of course, into all of this stuff. I think he was responsible for a bunch of British Israelites, like morons, going to Ireland and destroying some important ancient, like Celtic archaeological sites there because they were like trying to find the Ark of the Covenant or something like that.
Nice.
So that's also his legacy.
Oh my god, that's literally happening right now with the Bosnian pyramids with those idiots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just fucking like drilling through legitimate archaeological sites to find alien laser
Can you
marks.
imagine, like,
Yeah, like
this is like
bulldozing.
19th, like early 19th century Ireland, and then you have these Brits coming there and destroying their ancient sites.
I'm sure the Irish can imagine it. Yeah,
because they're like trying to find the Ark of the Covenant. Like, this is like really. Yes. I mean, like, what, like, middle class bourgeois people need to do to make some sense of their life. Like,
yeah.
and Edward Hine is the guy that we could call the actual founder of the British Israelism as a social movement, and also a revisionist. He revised some of Wilson's ideas, and that's very important. We'll talk about it. So Wilson died in 1871. But this was actually, he died at the moment when his ideas really became more popular, and based on them, a movement was started. And a crucial guy in this process was this guy called Edward Hine. So what happened in 1870s was that Germany united. So it was actually now a very important and powerful country in Europe and a competitor to Britain. So it was kind of not popular to say that they're also God's chosen people. So how Edward Hine revised Wilson's ideas, and based on this revision, he founded British Israelism as a movement, was to say that only the Brits are the God's chosen people and descendants of ancient Israelites. And he was even kind of pretty honest about it when he explained why he did that. Let me see.
Check your 75 pages of notes. Fucking wrote a dissertation about.
So Hine had a very honest comment about this revision that he did. He said that to include other Germanic peoples into God's chosen people would lead to a lot of inconveniences and calamities. So the fulfillment of prophecies, according to him, requires that the whole 10 tribes of ancient Israel would be consolidated in one island nation. So it's very specific.
One island nation.
Yes.
Which island?
Atlantis?
Yes. And anyway, he stated Ephraim, which they are descendants of, the tribe of Ephraim, as we said, he is really the synonymous with Israel and the whole 10 tribes. So not only that, not only Germans are not ancient Israels, what they are actually is Assyrians, the enemies of ancient Israel.
Oh, shit.
So the Germans are Assyrians. Sorry, Germans.
I'm sure there's great etymological support for all of that.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Yes.
Like tons of proof.
Yes.
So this is the period when a lot of British Israelite groups appeared all over Britain. And in the beginning, there were two kinds of them. There were the original ones that there were pan-Germanic ones. So one of them was called the Anglo-Ephraim Association. And the one that Hine led, that was like Brit-only British Israelite group, was called the Anglo-Israel Association. And in time, they became the dominant ones. And in 1878, they absorbed their competitors and became really the only game in town when it comes to British Israelite nutcases.
Yeah.
And
So nutcases separating from the rest of Europe.
Yes.
Not a new thing.
Yes. Yes. And so by 1886, they had 27 affiliated groups across Britain. So this is like a relatively popular thing. You know, they had books, they had magazines.
I'm sure they did. I mean, you got to make that money.
Yes. And so Hein consolidated this movement behind his ideas and made a kind of a distinct ideology out of it. He claimed that he was converted to this ideology already in 1840 when he was 15 years old after a lecture he heard by Wilson. And he was a very effective publicist, but he was not a great organizer. So there was another guy there who was called Edward Wheeler Bird, who was his competitor in the world of British Israelism in Britain at the time. So they both did the same things. They both had their own groups. They both wrote pamphlets, started magazines, and so on. But this Bird guy was much better at organizing stuff, and Hein was the ideologue. So Bird was a better organizer, and he really started the whole movement infrastructure, which was used to spread Hein's ideology. Although Hein, he didn't like him, he saw him as a competitor, he really helped spread his ideology. So Hein excluded other Germanic people, but he did have a better view of Jews than Wilson did. So sure, they are subordinate to the 10 tribes, yes, but they are a valued part of the whole Israel, something like this. So he didn't point so much that generated through race mixing and things like that.
Okay.
It was not a big part of his thing. But he was also very keen to point out how we are not Jews. Jews are Israelites, but not Israelites are not Jews. This is their mantra that they repeat all the time. I think this is probably because a lot of people said, "So you are saying we are all Jews?" And I go, "No, we're not Jews."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not racist, but
Yes.
we're not Jews. That's it.
And he also believed that the Anglo-Jewish resettlement of Palestine is essential for the fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
The Anglo-Jewish resettlement of Palestine.
Yes,
So together.
Together,
Uh-huh.
or Brits helping Jews go there, but also I guess Brits are also Israelites, so I don't know, they go together. I'm not exactly sure
Okay.
what that means.
So he's their Rabbi Alkali
Yes.
in Britain. Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier how the primary methodology they had to prove all of these things is this idiotic etymology stuff. But now they upgrade and they have more stupid shit to ways to prove their stuff. And this is now the age of pyramidism. So
nice.
Great.
So this stuff developed independently of British Israelism. And this was the belief that the great religious truths are somehow incorporated into the structure and dimensions of Egyptian pyramids. But in time, of course, this fused with British Israelism, and it really became an important part of British Israelism, and continued to be so. These people were into it in 1940s even. They were trying to predict the end of the Second World War by analyzing dimensions of pyramids and stuff like this.
Do you get the sense that this was do you get the sense from reading it that these people took this very, very seriously, or do you get a scam sense out of it? Are they selling papers, and is this just the
I kind of
latest
feel
fad
these
to
people are serious.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say, but I think a lot of them did take it seriously. I think they were clerks. They were desperate for any kind of excitement in their life, and this was it. So they better take it seriously, I think. I think this was their attitude. This was their chance for adventure and meaning in life. And it also was completely in tune with British imperialism. So a lot of people were ready to accept something like that because Britain was the world power empire. So isn't it nice to say how we are actually doing all of this because we are the God's chosen people and we are destined to dominate everyone because they are lesser breed than us. So
it's an imperial lubricant.
Yes. So so what they did was they thought that the mathematical analysis of dimensions of the pyramids seemed to reveal extraordinary and unexpected numerical relationships. So what these arrogant bastards concluded from this something that they imagined was that the ancient Egyptians were too primitive to have created such sophisticated structures.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Right.
Right.
So So what they do then is they say, okay, some biblical figures such as Enoch or Noah or Job were actual architects of this. And of course, they are our ancestors. So basically, we made them.
Do they even have fucking plumbing yet?
But that doesn't actually correspond to, right? Doesn't that not even correspond to when the pyramids were built? They were built far before Moses and all that shit.
I mean, nothing of this makes any sense. Yes.
Yeah, I guess they didn't have good radiocarbon dating techniques yet either. I mean,
yeah. So they compared these dimensions to like dimensions of the Earth, to some astronomical constants, and made all kinds of conclusions out of that. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. There's a big thing of like British and maybe American nationalism. Is this anti-metric stuff? I guess.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's always been like an identity thing, I guess. Yeah.
Well, for
The
these people, it's
Europeans
very
use
important.
metric. Suck our dicks.
Yeah, come and take our rulers.
Yeah.
Well, for these people, this is like an essential thing because these ancient ancestors of like Israelites and Brits came up with their own measurements when they came up with like when they made constructed and made pyramids, and this like I guess God's system of measurements later reappeared in Britain. So they claimed that the Egyptians actually used what they called a pyramid inch.
Okay.
Everything was constructed using this pyramid inch. So the pyramid inch is 1/1000. Like there is a 1/1000 deviation from the British inch. Okay. It's
Wow.
so there is a little bit of deviation, but basically it's the same. So 1/1000th deviation there.
Oh, I really hope that's the actual origin of the American metric obsession or whatever imperial obsession.
Yes.
God.
So
damn.
they used these measurements to try to date the second coming of the Christ, and everything. This is like
Sorry, they use the pyramid inch to date?
Yes, they thought that the pyramids were basically a kind of a clock that their ancestors made for them to rediscover some truth, such as the exact date of the second coming.
Well, like, I don't know, if their ancestors had the written language, presumably, and all that, why wouldn't they have just written all that shit down?
Yes, that would be easier. Yes.
Instead of like hiding it in the fucking pyramids.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
they
this
also
is a
have the
literate
Bible.
culture. Yeah.
They also have the Bible. So
Yeah.
why do you need a pyramid if you have a Bible?
I mean, like
But-
Slavic Nazis get to like make shit up because like they didn't have a written language before
Yeah,
Cyril and
yes.
Methodius. But like, if you're claiming this kind of origin, it's like, there's no excuse for not
There's no
having
excuse.
a written record
No.
for what you're talking about. I mean, they did keep pretty extensive written records of all kinds of shit.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, this would be a pretty important one.
Yeah.
So Hein, I said that this Bird guy was much better at organizing stuff. So Hein, at some point, I guess, got depressed and left for America. And so yeah, he went there and toured around America and basically brought British Israelism to the American public.
Brought the
This was-
shittier one.
Yeah, but he was the good ideologue and publicist. He just couldn't organize shit.
Okay.
But he was okay for lecturing and pamphleteering and stuff like this.
All right.
So that's
I
what he
sympathize.
did, and he stayed, I think, for 4 years in America. And like he got a good run there, but in the end, I think he was like completely broke, and his group in Britain had to like send him money to come back or something like this. I think he was the one who, in the end, was like trying to preach to some immigrants in America who were like I imagine some Italians or maybe Polish people who were like very confused. Like, why is this like person talking to us how the English are actually ancient Jews and what does he have to do with us? So they were not very receptive. And he was like, and this is when the
Probably didn't speak English.
yes. And so at that time, his friends from like England sent him money, and he came back home.
Oh.
But just before that, some like homegrown American British Israelites appeared. So I think maybe the first one is a guy called Joseph Wilde, and he was like many of these people. Like many of these people are pastors or like preachers or lay preachers. So
Mm.
this one was Wild was a pastor of the Union Congregational Church in Brooklyn. And,
Pastor Wiles.
Pastor Wild, yes. So he
Sick.
wrote his first British Israelite pamphlets in 1879, and he started preaching. And in the next 3 years, he gave 130 Anglo-Israel sermons. And so this is now an interesting thing, because I said that how these British Israelites claimed that the Brits are the descendants of the tribe of Ephraim, who was just the best Israelite ever. So,
Yes.
but he had a brother called Manasseh. So this Joseph Wild, he concluded that the United States are the fulfillment of the prophecy of Manasseh, and that
God.
actually the Americans are somehow descendants of Manasseh. But this is now, they're really kind of mixing up things here, because Puritans early on, they kind of used all of these things metaphorically, but these people said, no, we are actual biological descendants of these people. And now somehow this guy says, but we are the fulfillment of the prophet, like America is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Manasseh, which is like, doesn't make any sense. How would you biologically distinct Americans from the Brits?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, politically, it came from like British.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
But basically,
nuts.
they say we are descendants of this other guy.
Completely unnecessary, unless you really want to sell your own newspaper.
So suddenly, when it suits them, they go more into the metaphorical direction.
Yeah.
So,
what's the general relation to like Anglicanism, for example, as opposed to like other like Protestant?
They
branches,
were never like accepted, but they were very influential. I think there were a lot of Anglicans and people in the church who were kind of receptive to these ideas, and they never became like a sect. Like it was never like a sect or a strain in Anglicanism or Protestantism or in Christianity. So yeah, they didn't have a distinctive like sect or a church. So many of them were Anglicans, and I think a lot of people in the Anglican Church were kind of receptive or supportive, but it never became like nothing is like an official position of the church or something like that. As far as I understood. So Wild founded the Lost Israel Identification Society of Brooklyn. So there is this again idea of this hidden Israel. So Anglo-Saxons need to figure out their true identity, and until they do that, they will remain this hidden Israel. So it's all about realizing your true identity. So Joseph Wild was probably the first one in America, but many of them appeared. So there was one more. I like, this is where I got kind of anxious, because there was like lots of these guys, like really a lot of them. They all sound like the same person. And so one of them was this like Charles Doughton. He was a lieutenant in the army. So he's someone who was cited by Christian identity people even now, and they usually cite him as Professor Doughton of Yale, something like that. Although they despise academics, but they like to claim him as their own. But what happened actually in the end of the 19th century was that like some of these colleges in Yale were required to provide military training to their students. And in time, like, I guess this mutated into, well, maybe not military training, but okay, they will have lectures in strategy and similar things. So they hired this lieutenant in the army, Doughton, to do that, basically. So this is why they today present him as like professor from Yale, something like this.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Yes. And so he did all of these things that all of these people do. He preached, traveled around, started publishing pamphlets and magazines and books. He hooked up with this like astronomer and pyramidologist called C. Piazzi Smith, something like this. So they wrote things together about pyramids and all of this stuff that I mentioned.
What
And
time frame is this now? Sorry, when are we?
This is now late 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century already.
Okay.
And he started publishing a magazine which was called Our Race. And he died in 1909, and his followers continued publishing this. At this time, there was many other American Anglo-Israelite preachers, ideologues. I read this book about them, but I don't remember many of their names. They didn't sound that interesting. Kind of got anxious by trying to remember all of them. Most of them were kind of these like preachers. They did the same thing basically and said the same thing.
So I mean, yeah, when it hit the U.S., it kind of hit the ground running, and
yes,
there were a lot of people willing to take up this cause.
Yes, and it was kind of also in Canada there was a lot of them, and
of course we always forget about Canada, and Canada factors so heavily into
never forget about Canada.
Every single like white power, insane fucking nationalist thing that we talk about, Canada is heavily involved.
Yeah, very influential figures come out of Canada.
Friendly neighbor to the north, my ass.
So, I mean, the thing is that at the time, many Americans were already into this idea that the U.S. has a millennial role, and there was already these older ideas about Americans, as a new Zion or new Israel. So, you could already maybe figure out that maybe this will be a next, world power or something like this. So why not have, this is a part of it that we are actually, the actually descendants of Manasseh somehow. And
the Mormons had this idea that some Native Americans were the lost tribes of Israel, right?
Yes. True. There's this guy called Charles Fox Parham, and he was one of those Christian British Israelite preachers. But he's supposedly this guy who wrote this book that I read. He says that this Parham guy was actually the founder of Pentecostalism.
Oh, really?
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Interesting.
These people kind of infused these British Israelite ideas into evangelical sects that were emerging out of Midwestern Methodism at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this was kind of, fused together. And then through like different migrations, they brought it to the Pacific coast, which will be one of the important areas where later Christian identity came out of.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, this guy who founded Pentecostalism, he was like preaching in LA in the 1920s or something like this. There was also one other guy who founded something, who was a Christian identity guy who was a preacher, and he founded his own church, which was called, I think, something like Radio Church or something like this, which is kind of, I found it interesting. So now we are getting into kind of almost to the final, maybe the third act, I would say, of this episode. Mostly focusing on three more guys. I'm sorry. Okay, this is like probably too many overall already, but this is like the cut version. Like there was like really a lot of.
No, I got you.
Yes. So I would say there were like, let's say, three more important guys. They're all Americans. And this is like the third act is like the connection between British Israelism and racism and right-wing politics is becoming more intense. So first we have this guy called Reuben H. Sawyer, and he was active in the 1920s. So yes, as I said, he did all of these things that these people do. He published texts, magazines, traveled around, preached this truth of British Israelism. But what was specific about him, that he started combining British Israelite stuff with right-wing and racist politics in a very explicit way. So he was born in 1866. He was a pastor of the East Side Christian Church in Portland, Oregon. He was an accomplished speaker. He had his own British Israel group, which was called Anglo-Israel Research Society, which was very active. So it was so active that he even resigned as a pastor and completely became a full-time British Israelite. So he lectured throughout Pacific Northwest and also in Canada, specifically Vancouver, which was also one later an important place for the emergence of Christian identity later. And he even continued lecturing up to the end of 1930s when he was already in his 70s. He was also an important figure in the kind of international British Israel movement, because at some point, I think in 1920, they established a kind of an umbrella organization in London, which was called the British Israel World Federation. So he was a part of that. And that's all kind of what same or similar to all the other people we mentioned so far. But what was different about this guy Sawyer was that he had a parallel career, and the parallel career that he had was that he was a member of the little group called the KKK.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
How did we not think of the fucking?
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
So the 1920s were the heyday of the so-called Second Clan, which is really that's the clan that we all kind of think about, and it's also the LARPers clan. No,
Yes,
it's based on a movie. Like
yeah. Also, a pretty big scam.
Yes. So at the time they spread like unlike the original clan in the 19th century, they spread beyond the south across the states, and they were in Oregon as well. And so they claimed at this time that how did they call the ideology that they supported? Americanism.
Yeah.
So they were all about Americanism, and the Americanism was, and this ideology is defined as there are basically two main pillars, and one is hate for alien elements, and the other is traditional morality. So,
all right,
great combination.
Can't go wrong there.
Morality and hate.
Yes. So in Oregon at the time, there was an important clan leader, which was called Fred L. Gifford. So Gifford and Sawyer kind of hooked up. And Sawyer was really focused in the early 20s. He was really focused on his clan activities. And he tried to make it even more acceptable to the general community, especially to people in Portland at the time, who I guess they needed a bit more soothing rhetoric to accept all this. And there is it's interesting how he did that. And there is so he introduced the clan to Portland with an address, which this rally was held in a municipal auditorium in 1921.
Okay.
And he spoke on behalf of the clan. Sawyer did.
Okay.
This is one sentence how he defined what the clan is. It has two twists, at least two twists, I would say, in this.
Right.
So he starts very Nazi. So he says that what they want, the clan, is a cleansed and purified Americanism. This is very Nazi. So, but then he says, where law-abiding citizens will be respected and their rights defended, irrespective of race, religion, or color.
Yes.
So this is the twist. But now we go back to hardcore Nazism in the end of the sentence. So long as they make an honest effort to be Americans and Americans only.
Okay. I assume that there's probably somewhere under this some idea that the races have some natural obligation to each other too.
Well, of course. I mean, by Americans, he thinks white. Everyone should be Anglo-Saxon.
So
whites.
irrespective of whether you're German or WASP or French American,
or you should try, even if you're not white, you should try your best to behave white. I think this is.
Okay.
Yeah, but in that context, he's probably talking about Irish
hard sell.
Or Italians or something.
Harder sell.
So while he gave these speeches, he did that on a stage which was decorated by an image of a burning cross.
Well, sure. Yeah.
So
go with the classics.
So all of these lectures were actually packed. It was full of people. What this other organizer, Gifford in the clan, and Sawyer realized at the time was that there were no women in the group. So what they want to do is decide. They founded a women's group, and it was called the Ladies of the Invisible Empire, or Lotties. And would you know it? You know who was the main, the first lady of the Invisible Empire? It was Sawyer himself, because he was the head of the Ladies of the Invisible Empire. So it's I don't know if maybe there was not enough women, so he was the head of the group. But then Gifford and Sawyer had a fight, So Sawyer left the KKK, and after that, Gifford reconstituted the women's group, and at that time, his wife became the leader of the group. So she replaced Sawyer. So Sawyer was one of the leaders of the movement that claimed that the Anglo-Saxon people and were descendants of the ancient Israelites. So there was a problem in his career in KKK because KKK was an extremely anti-Semitic organization. So
You don't say.
there was a lot of explaining to do here. So and also there is you can see an evolution of his views. So while he was a British Israelite, but just before he joined the Klan, he had this kind of classic British Israelite views about Jews that I already tried to explain a few times. Kind of patronizing but protective attitude towards them, let's say.
Yeah.
And he was respected by Jewish organizations, and he was often invited to speak in front of Jewish organizations, and saw himself as a protector of Jews against anti-Semitism, for example. But in his first address to the Klan, there is a change. So now he says something. He distinguishes between the Jews who are like true to their father and like are in true lineage, Jewish lineage, and they honor their father and such things, from the bad Jews who usurped the Jewish name and who are like really not loyal to American ideals. So now he starts to distinguish between good and bad Jews. And then in next year, this progresses even further, and I will read what he says next year.
We have to wait?
Yeah, I have to find it because I didn't write it down.
Thought it was like a cliffhanger.
I have to find page.
Tune in next year.
Next year we'll
Yeah.
What he really thought about the Jews.
With the amount of notes Ray took just now, it might be the case.
Yeah, okay, so this is so he was the protector of Jews from anti-Semitism. That's how he saw himself. Then in 21, he thought that there are good Jews and bad Jews. I guess he at the time thought many of the Jews are really good, and they're even like if they accepted Christ, they could even be members of the KKK. He said, like this is like if they're true to Americanism, loyal to it, like there's no problem. But in 22, things change, as we'll just see. So he says this: Jews are either Bolshevists undermining our government, or Shylocks in finance or commerce who gain control and command of Christians as borrowers or employers. It is repugnant to a true American to be bossed by a sheeny. And in some parts of America, the kikes are so thick that a white man can hardly find room to walk on a sidewalk. And where they are so thick, it is Bolshevism they are talking, Bolshevism and revolution. So,
first of all,
okay, so I did just
Sheeny's
look up
a new one to
Sheeny.
me. Yeah, okay.
Sheeny, offensive, North American. Sheeny, plural now, Sheenies, a Jewish person, origin 19th century, origin unknown.
Well, all right.
Damn, I thought I knew slurs pretty well. I've never fucking heard Sheeny. God damn.
Yeah, it went away.
Yeah.
How come this is like the second club that Jews are being invited to that I don't think they would genuinely enjoy going to? You can join the British Israeli movement. You can join the Ku Klux Klan.
yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
I guess.
Just stop being Jews and you
Yes.
stop being real Jews and become fake pretend Jews.
Yeah, and then you can start paying us, membership dues. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I assume he didn't give this speech to his Jewish friends earlier.
No. When he spoke in front of B'nai Brit, he didn't say such things. No.
Yeah.
Which he did, actually, in like just a year or two prior to this.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, I gotta go. I gotta hit this Klan rally after.
Yeah. Okay.
I gotta call you guys Sheenies.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are now coming to the finals of the episode. It's about two more guys called Howard Rand and William Cameron. William Cameron, we already mentioned and spoke about.
Bill Cameron. We're
in the
familiar.
episode
Back in the Ford episode.
on Henry
Billy
Ford.
Cams.
Yes, he was like Henry Ford's BFF.
Yes.
And
Ghost Rider. Really.
Howard Rand. Howard Rand is an American guy, obviously, and he's interesting because he was actually a second-generation British Israelite. He was born into British Israelite family.
Like Beck with Scientology.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was also different because he was the most serious until this moment, and in the sense that he was really committed to creating a truly national, like an American national British Israelite or Anglo-Israelite movement. So, and
American National British Israelite Movement.
yes. And what he did also, where he was specific and a bit different from Sawyer, and I will say how, in this process was that he embraced right-wing politics, but he went much deeper than Sawyer did, because Sawyer basically he was a KKK racist and a British Israelite, but he didn't really combine those things. He didn't fuse them into one thing. And Howard Rand was all about fusing this stuff into one thing. And you can already see that this is the route, or even more like we are progressing more towards Christian identity. So he had this kind of more three kind of things that he focused on. So one was spreading British Israelism in America, creating a national organization was the second one, but the third one was creating a political agenda for British Israelis. So he was born in 1889, and in 1913 he got a BA in law at the University of Maine, a lawyer, of course. And by 19...
As everybody in this entire fucking series we've done from the beginning.
There will be another thing that was mentioned many times in this arc specifically soon. So by 1928, he was the official U.S. representative of the London-based British Israel World Federation that I mentioned already. This is the umbrella group of these weirdos. So in 1930, he met a group of like a businessmen, and after that, he established his own group, which was called the Anglo-Saxon Federation of America. And where were the headquarters of this group?
Dearborn, Michigan?
Of course, Detroit, yes.
Our recurring character throughout
the
entire...
I guess that's the main
arc.
American fascist.
It's because it's so fucking close to Canada.
Yes, okay. So the first conference of this group was held in Detroit in 1930. And what he did is like all of these fucking people, he traveled thousands of miles across the US and preached and talked about this stupid shit. And then branches started of his group appearing all over quite rapidly. And his group became the dominant British Israeli group and started merging with some of the older group that I mentioned, like of that Totten guy, the pretend Yale professor. And so this group kind of merged with his group. He had a weekly radio program, I think in LA, I'm not sure. And in 30 and 31, they produced like 42,000 of like pamphlets and books, I think. And so this was like the time of the Great Repression, and this was really their time to shine, because a lot of these millenarian ideas became very popular because they suddenly became very attractive, but also more plausible to people. So it was believable to people that they're living in some kind of end times.
Yeah, right.
So that's him. So the other guy who was his close collaborator was the guy that we already mentioned and talked about in the Henry Ford episode, called William J. Cameron. So he met Rand at this Federation meeting in Detroit in 1930, and soon after that he became the president of this Anglo-Saxon Federation of America. Rand was he had different titles, like general secretary or something like this, but he was kind of the guy who ran it from behind somehow, like in the shadows. And William Cameron was a more kind of public figure and official leader, which was appropriate because he was, at the time that he became the leader of this organization, he was already a public figure, linked with Henry Ford.
Yeah,
he worked for him from 1918 until 1946, and he was his main PR guy. And because Henry Ford, as we said, I will just mention it again, he had problems like talking coherently, people didn't understand him.
Yeah.
So Cameron was his link with the media and really with the world. And he was kind of his interpreter and intermediary, really. Also, he was the main editor and one of the main writers in Henry Ford's newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, as we already mentioned in the Henry Ford episode, which was famous as the main kind of anti-Semitic newspaper at the time, and Cameron was the main anti-Semitic writer at the time. So, okay. Cameron, like many of these people, was a lay preacher, and when he joined the movement, he brought substantial assets with him, like connections with Henry Ford in terms of PR, contacts, but also money and finances, of course.
Yeah.
So Cameron and Rand together were kind of behind the first really systematic and organized attempt to link British Israelism with the right-wing politics. So how they did that is the Cameron suggested to Rand that they publish a special issue of their journal, which was called Destiny, and send it to the leading men across America. And they did that through what they called patriotic organizations, which probably means, KKK and similar groups. So they I think, printed 30,000 of copies and sent it to these people. And try to kind of merge these movements, or at least partially, some way. Prior to becoming he was a British Israelite before he joined this organization, but before he joined, he was well known as a anti-Semitic writer, especially as we covered already for his articles that he published in the 1920s in the Dearborn Independent, and which later became the basis for the book The International Jew. And there was also, as Fritz told us, this big trial when Aaron Shapiro sued Ford. I think also not only for the International Jew stuff, but specifically for these articles that claim that the Jews are somehow exploiting farmer organizations.
Yeah. We didn't get that much into the trial with Shapiro, but yeah.
Which was this kind of quite...
It was quite public. This was a really big deal.
Yeah.
So this, Jews exploiting farmers was this kind of usual Nazi thing. So the Nazis kind of falsely or maybe not genuinely idolized, peasants and farmers and rural life, and then were a lot of their ideology was based around how the decadent urban people are exploiting farmers, and especially Jews and so on. So this was this kind of stuff, which was very, of course, hypocritical, coming from Henry Ford and so on.
Right.
But when the trial happened, I think in 1947, what Cameron did was he completely absolved his boss and friend and said that it's only his fault and Henry Ford had nothing to do with it. Also, it was completely untrue.
Yes.
But anyway, the trial ended it was a mistrial anyway.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how, later he was never really able to be honest about Cameron, about these writings completely. Although, it was kind of obvious, it was very transparent, but he was not, he was never honest, because in the 50s, just before before he died, he also denied. He denied. Then he in the trial he said that he was the sole responsible person, that Henry Ford has nothing to do with it. But in 50s he said that he had nothing to do with it, and that actually this was this idea of this other editor called Pip or something like this, Pip, who was like an anti-Semite, and how Cameron was really against that completely. Was disgusted by these articles, but he could do nothing there. And this Pip guy insisted, so they went with it. This was a complete lie, because this editor that he accused in the 50s as being behind it resigned already in 1920.
He was an early one to quit, and specifically on the grounds that it was getting weird and anti-Semitic.
Yeah, he was disgusted by anti-Semitism and resigned for those reasons.
And that's actually how Cameron came to become like the guy at the Dearborn Independent. Yeah.
So he lied just before he died. He lied about this, but where he also was lying, but was consistent in the 20s and the 50s, was that Henry Ford had nothing to do with it. So he really remained loyal to his friend Henry. And he said, No, he did have like strong antipathy like to international financiers or something like
bankers,
this, but
yeah, right.
he was not an anti-Semite. Like
Bolsheviks.
yes. At the time when he was writing these things, he met a new friend, Cameron, a guy that we all also mentioned in the Henry Ford episode, a German Nazi called Kurt Ludeke, who in the 20s moved to the US and in 1932 became the official representative of the National Socialist Party of Germany, Workers' Party of Germany, in the US. And he befriended Cameron. And actually, after the trial ended, Ford also apologized to Jewish organizations,
Yes.
which completely like disgusted Ludeke. And he went to see his friend Cameron and found him completely depressed and fucked up because Henry Ford apologized to the Jews, and he really felt sorry for him. So Ludeke did. Ludeke, by the way, later he went back to Germany and then became some kind of a dissident and was in a concentration camp and then escaped and migrated back to America or something like this. Huh. But he was very anti-Semitic in the 20s and 30s, and this is why he met Cameron and was, the official representative of the Nazi Party in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, was he in the Teutonia organization? Do you know?
I don't know. Yeah. I didn't find this. He was also the main popularizer of the protocols of the learned. What's it called?
Elders of Zion.
Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Yes, and he was the main popularizer of that. Even in the 50s, he was saying things. Well, they say it's a forgery, but what does that mean? Maybe it's a fictional text, but it's truthful. So what does it mean that it's a forgery? So obviously, yeah.
It means somebody fucking made it up.
that you should not write openly anti-Semitic text. And later in the 40s or 50s, when his friend wrote some text, also some kind of British Israelite guy, he advised him to delete all of these openly anti-Semitic things. But he told him because you cannot publish something these days if you attack the Jews. That's he had this kind of pragmatic where he didn't stop being an anti-Semite. He just thought it's not pragmatic really to write those things.
Just don't do it publicly.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't publish it under your own name.
That's why we have the phrase international bankers, use it.
Yes, exactly. I have some antipathy to international financiers, for example. Something like
do you?
Yeah. So we're really coming to the end now. And I think maybe this will remind you of someone. Okay. So
our baseball card deck is getting fat, right? With this, Let's see.
In 1933, Hitler got to power, and this is the year when Cameron did a series of British Israel lectures. And what was his main points about in these lectures? They were that the Bible is a racial book. The story that it tells is the story of the Anglo-Saxon race. What is interesting here is that now the American British Israelis, they go back to the roots of British Israelism, and they now expand again who the Anglo-Saxons and the Israelites are. It's not only the Brits. For Cameron, these are also the Germans, the Dutch, the Scandinavians, the Bohemians, and so on. So Western Europeans, basically, which makes sense for an American.
Well, Germanic Western Europeans, right?
Yes.
Did they include the French into this? Are they like Cajun?
They did, yes. Many of them did, and Italians actually.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes. And he says, the Bible is the only reliable racial guide I know.
Sounds like James Mason.
Yes, exactly. And what is the Anglo-Saxon story that the Bible tells us? It tells the story of the struggle of the race of Israel with the race of. So I don't know, how do you pronounce this? Esau. It's E-S-A-U.
How do they say that?
Esau.
Yeah,
Esau.
I think we say Esau. Yeah, where I'm from anyway.
So the Bible tells us a story of a race war between the race of Israel, which are actually Europeans, with the race of Esau, which are actually Jews. The race of Esau, he explains, is the anti-Israel power that endures to this day. And in time, this race amalgamated with the Jews and corrupted the Jews. So the Jews are no longer God's chosen people, and the Bible tells us they explicitly lost their this place because of racial mixing. Anyway,
right, Jews very famous for
yes,
mixing races.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's The Europeans totally like pure blooded, no mixing at all. Jews mix up all the time, and so they degenerated through ages by race mixing with the Gentiles. But I mean, who are the Gentiles then? I don't know. Europeans?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Slavic people?
Maybe Slavs, yeah.
Maybe Slavs, yes.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, this is now the trick. So they degenerated through this race mixing and not the chosen people. They originally were Israelites from the tribe of Judah. But then he says Judah was the worst of Israelites. So even before of this race mixing, he was the tribe was the worst of the Israelites, and they were defined by darkness and perversity. So, like they were defined by darkness and perversity before all the race mix. So I don't know. They just can't win the Jews, I think, in this thing. And
so you mean like the real Jews can't?
Yes.
Yeah.
When in this mix of people trying to claim to actually be Jews when they're not.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is somehow all this makes a lot of sense to these people.
People descended of pagans from Northern Europe, pretending to be Jews,
right?
Are saying that the real Jews are the worst of the Jews.
Yes.
It's insane. So in the end of the 30s, he kind of he didn't have an active role in British Israelism anymore. He wasn't the president of the federation. Some other guy was, but he remained a British Israelite. And during the Second World War, he was like having a correspondence with two other important British Israelites, some lieutenant and some other guy, I don't know. And they were trying to, they were also into this pyramid stuff and trying to figure out when will the war end based on some calculations using the pyramid inch and stuff like this. So that's what he did during the war. Cameron was also like a heavy drinker, let's say, or a degenerate alcoholic, maybe. And, so he as a main PR guy for Ford, he was also the guy who spoke at a radio program that they had, which was called Ford Sunday Evening Hour.
Or the original Jews drank gin.
Yes. And he was very proud, by the way, that he had this, I don't know, was it a joke or something? I think he was serious, but he said that through the decades, sometimes pretending to be a reader writing to his newspaper, sometimes under his own name. But the thing was how Jeremiah he was in scripture, was from the tribe of Judah, but he couldn't be actually, because whoever heard of a Jew called Jerry?
That's like in The Sopranos. Who ever heard of a Jew riding horses?
Yes, and he repeated this like in many decades.
That's good etymology.
Yeah, so he had this radio show for Ford, and from 34 until 42, and at some point there were like 16 to 20 million people listening to this.
34,
it was
42,
mostly music, but he was also talking there, and every time he was like totally wasted, like really, really, really wasted. But he because he was drunk all the time, basically, he could like trick people who didn't know him that he was like relatively sober. So he was functional. He could do that. But Ford really liked him. Like they were loyal to each other.
Teetotaler Ford.
Yes. He tolerated him the whole time, and he had another guy there just in case if this guy like passes out of like being too drunk, so that he can continue the radio show. But that apparently
he had an understudy in case he passes out.
Yes, but apparently that never happened.
Fantastic.
And when he had, of course, he had problems with health.
Ford probably had that like little speed hookup too.
It's keeping the balance.
And then he, like, Ford would send him to his Henry Ford Hospital, so there was no problems there. And they had like daily lunches together, Ford with him and his son as well, like Ford's son. And mind you, a lot of this drinking was also during Prohibition.
Right.
So when Henry Ford would find out who were the sources of his booze, he would make sure that they got arrested and shut down. Like this.
Okay.
How he helped his friend.
Damn.
But maybe one of the reasons why Cameron's career as an active British Israelite didn't continue was that Rand, the other guy who ran their Anglo-Saxon Federation, whatever its name was also like a prohibitionist. And not only was he a prohibitionist, he ran in elections on the Prohibition Party list, which I didn't know even existed.
Well, I guess the Klan was, at least in theory, pro-prohibition, I guess, despite also being a bunch of degenerate alcoholics.
Yeah. Yeah, because Cameron was a heavy drinker, maybe this was the reason why they, went in different ways. He did stop drinking in the end. He was like completely unapproachable, depressed. No one could see him. His health was fucked up. But in the late 40s, he joined some kind of a Missouri-based sect, which was called Unity, and he became even an assistant minister in it. And he stopped drinking, and then he died in 1955. But Howard Rand, the guy who had this idea of fusing racism with British Israelism, was born in the end of the 19th century. Even in the 1880s, he died in 1990, like when he was over 100 years old. Yeah.
Damn.
Yes. So, but their peak was, the Great Depression era. This is when they kind of peaked. And after the Second World War, it was the decline of British Israelism, but also when Christian identity appeared out of their ashes.
Of course, if fascism would thrive in something called depression.
Of course, yes.
It makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah, so that's that.
Damn.
What I had to say.
I mean, that line runs like right through this arc, really.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it kind of connects with almost everyone.
And stuff still to come, too, really.
Yeah. Oh, with a lot still to come. Because Christian identity is one of the most important parts of this arc, and we've just barely started to scratch the surface of it.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, when I suggested this, suggested it because I knew there was connection between Christian identity, which is an important thing for American fascism. Yeah. But this is I think it's generally important, I would say, for American and British nationalism, I think, this topic.
No, we appreciate your sacrifice.
I think it reveals a lot, I would say, or connects things. I don't know.
Yeah, on some kind of primal level that I wasn't really expecting too. There's
Well, I mean, this idea of the lost tribes of Israel being in the U.S. is also something that we're going to continue to see throughout TENEPOD. I mean, because you see it fucking everywhere. I mean, you see it from the Mormons, you see it the Black Hebrew Israelites, these Christian identity,
And I think also later on when we get into this more alien territory, that's all going to come back with kind of a new framework.
Right.
Still very much some kind of chosen people, but at this point, they've filtered the Israeli part completely out, and you're left with, the Nephilim or some shit. Yeah.
I mean, this kind of, it really fits well with a lot of things, this ideology, because this ideology can justify both British and American imperialism and explain it in some way. It can also present itself as Christian, but also be very much into Aryan, pan-Germanic racist stuff. It can also say that we are Israelites, but also we are also very anti-Semitic, and has some kind of explanation for that as well. And there's also a way to explain how, democracy is also proof of our racial superiority, but it's also our thing. It's not really for everyone. It's naturally ours.
Right.
So, yeah, it's...
Yeah, great. Yeah. popular equality is naturally just ours.
Yes.
Makes perfect sense.
Mm.
Well,
I mean,
well done.
Yeah, it's full of contradictions, nonstop, all the time, starting from its name and everything, really. But it's
Yeah, and somehow we can still also, if we want to, take it back to Shabbatai Tzvi
yes.
and to like our second arc, where a bunch of people in the 17th century lost their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Over this false prophet out of Turkey who ended up dying in fucking Montenegro.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then we're back in Montenegro.
From there, all kinds of, as Pinto talked about in that episode, I mean, there was a big crisis in Judaism itself, and then you got these weird, spin-offs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this British Israelite stuff is really based on really misinformed rumors about Shabbatai Tzvi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just build through centuries on that, on rumors. And one thing that's also connected to Shabbatai Tzvi, and that kind of reappeared because Shabbatai Tzvi was a Sephardic Jew. There was this early belief by Brits and some Americans, pre-British Israelite stuff, how the actual lost tribes are hidden somewhere in Asia, and some identified them with Sephardic Jews, and this is why they also thought that this is them returning now with Shabbatai Tzvi and so on. But this kind of returns with this American, kind of more KKK-oriented British Israelites like Sawyer and then later Cameron, because what I forgot to mention is when they start distinguishing, like Sawyer did, between the good Jews and the bad Jews, and the Jews who remained true to their lineage of Judah, which is a lesser Israelite lineage, but nevertheless Israelite, are actually Sephardic Jews. And, and the bad Jews are the Ashkenazi Jews.
Okay.
Of course,
but most of the American Jews were Ashkenazi, so that's also convenient for them.
Yeah, because they would never have to run into Sephardic Jews unless they, went to the Spanish colony, whatever. Yeah.
So it's a very convenient ideology for them, which I guess is the purpose of ideology, to be convenient. But it covers a lot of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a crazy way to start what's going to be a recurring theme now in this upcoming series, because we're going to do some episodes on Christian identity.
Yeah.
And it's going to go all kinds of crazy ways.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it any other way. I mean, it's
really.
well, like, Ray, like you had a hard time slogging through some of this fucking British Israeli stuff. Christian identity is kind of, I mean, it is based on that, and it's even more insufferable.
Yes.
I mean, it also eventually walks us into the Temple of Blood, which is crazy. Right?
Exactly. That's what I was.
Well, because it's like the Temple of Blood to the O9A, right? The O9A is like the more quaint European equivalent of something that just gets turned into something completely insane.
Yes. But also, and
that one is also completely insane.
Yes.
But it gets even more like deranged,
but they're not
psychotic,
vampires.
and violent with like Christian identity.
There is an even more direct connection between the Temple of Blood and British Israelism, and that's that Joshua Caleb Sutter, the leader of the Temple of Blood, was literally a Christian identity preacher in the Aryan nations. And there is even an audio of him preaching this shit.
Was he then Wolfram Hall, I think, was one of his Christian identity names.
Taylor Moses, I think, was his Aryan nation's name.
Okay.
Yeah. We're talking about this because our next episode will be about updates on Temple of Blood and other nine angles assholes.
We meant it when we said we were coming back to America. We're going all in.
Indeed.
All right, so stay tuned for that. So it is completed.
It is
completed.
Finally.
All right, well done.
All right, cheers.
Ciao.
Ciao.